Hey, what's up? Zach here, and today I've got the Nike Giannis Immortality 3. Honestly, I think there's going to be a lot of people that like these maybe more than the Zoom Freak 5. We've already seen Giannis wear these in the season opener. A lot of interesting things about these and some things under the hood I was not expecting. Let's get into them. Now, starting off in the uppers from like 3,000 feet, they don't look like much. However, when you get closer to them in the forefoot, this is actually a pretty tight woven piece of material here. There is not much room for egress either. I mean, it is a pretty tightly wound piece of material. Now that does kind of give way to the midfoot where there's a lot more almost netting and meshing. Now, if you look at this thing on the breathability mapping, I didn't have much hopes for the breathability test after this because the only place that air was blowing out was around the tongue, kind of around these cages on the medial side and through the tongue, but in the forefoot, nothing was coming out. That does kind of correlate with how dense the forefoot of the shoe is. However, if you look at the breathability test, because the shoe is just so light and the materials are so light, it only heated up 114.5 degrees and then cooled down another 44.4 degrees. And like I said, I think it's just because the materials are very light, so the shoe doesn't heat up all that much. Also, because the heat gun is right kind of in the midfoot, there is room for that heat to kind of blow out of these two areas of the shoe in the midfoot. So that was a nice surprise. Now, speaking of that tongue, it is a little bit thinner, but it's also pretty aggressively gusseted. I had no issues with neuritis or nerve pain tying down the laces. You do get a nice runner's knot that is reinforced with stitching. So, I mean, it should last decently well. The heel counter is pretty low, but for me, as long as I had the runner's knot in there, I was not experiencing any heel slippage. So even a low profile orthotic is fine. A super bulky one, I'm not so sure. To be honest, I think you'd have to crank it down pretty good on that. But speaking of that lockdown and containment, if you look at the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, the burr does get through the waxy, drag guard layer, but it does not get into the textile underneath of it, which was nice to see. Now you do have foam in between there, but a pretty decent amount of rubber coming up on the toe cap. So I would say dragging on an indoor court, just fine. But on an outdoor court, you are going to start to make this foam look a little weird, but they definitely are not going to be the worst out there. But getting into the midsole teardown, I will confess I did not look up one thing about these shoes before I took them on court and before I did the ball bearing test on them. Turns out it is an entire bed of Nike Renew foam, which I might be in the minority on this, but I actually like Nike Renew foam a lot. I think it's nice and bottom light feeling. It's springy feeling, spongy feeling, pretty comfortable. It just doesn't last as long as some other foams. Now, in this one here, it does have a really thick shank on it, right? And it is pretty long too, top loaded. So this one is gonna have a little bit more longevity than maybe some other Renew foams that have a little bit of a wimpier shank. Still, it's gonna bottom it in the forefoot faster than some others. Orthotics, which we'll talk about in the fit section, will help that as well. However, if you look at that Renew foam on the bounce height test, it did get 37 centimeters in the heel and then 35.5 in the forefoot, which is pretty decent for, a budget shoe foam. It still, like I said, does have some spring and some bounce to it, especially with that shank. And with the shoe being a little bit lighter, it's also a little bit easier to get up off the ground. So all in all, like I said, this setup to me in the midsole is really nice, especially for a lighter player. Now, getting into the outsole tread, I do like the idea of this having more continuous linear patterns as well as broken up linear patterns, almost like a digital pattern down there, which I really like. And it does have these two big channels here, so when you are putting a lot of force into the shoe, you get a little bit more suction cupping. If you look at it on the grip test, weighted or unweighted, yes, I put weights in there for everyone that wanted me to do it, and it was exactly the same because it's on a 30-degree slope. And so you do get some decent grip on there. It does not completely slide down there like some other shoes do. However, what I noticed is the more warming you get into them, the better they get, but also they pick up dust as well. So I'd say this is more on the forgiving end of the spectrum. It is definitely, you don't come to a screeching halt in these for sure. But I would say if you keep the treads clean and get some warmth into them, they definitely get better and better on an outdoor court really no issues whatsoever. So as long as you're keeping them clean, the grip's gonna be okay. Just don't expect it to be super grippy, super elite like some others. And if you look at the speed ratio of the Immortality 3, it comes in at a 2.73, which is pretty darn high for a basketball shoe. Number one, it is very streamlined. Number two, it's on the lighter end. And number three, it's got a really nice, stiff, top-loaded shank and really light, bouncy foam on there, so of course it's gonna do pretty well. I did notice going coast to coast on these, they were very forgiving. I really kind of enjoyed going up and down the court on them. After a while playing them, especially after a while playing them on an outdoor asphalt or concrete court, that's when you're probably gonna start to notice a little bit less spring back on these, a little bit less bounce. But for an indoor court, rubberized, or hardwood, I think it's gonna be, really nice, especially if, like I said, once again, if you're a lighter player. Now, if you look at the Outsole durability test, I almost said upper durability test, 10 seconds high grit sandpaper, about a millimeter of damage on this. The durometer comes in at a 17.25, which is, like I said, very good for a budget shoe. I think if you don't shuffle a lot outdoors, I think they'll be fine. If you have lighter footwork outdoors, I know that's kind of like the word of the video here is lighter player, lighter footwork, but it really does ring true, especially because these treads are very narrow. So there's not a lot of surface area to kind of protect it, right? So it soon starts to, get heated up and that friction starts getting higher and higher and the heat gets higher, it's gonna start to wear down. So I think if you have lighter footwork, play outdoors in a colder climate, I think you should be okay on these. Otherwise, start to watch out for these lines starting to wear down over time on very gritty outdoor courts. The fit of the Immortality 3s, it's pretty narrow. A narrow and medium foot, I think, can go true to sizing. A medium foot does break these in okay. 2E foot, I could play in them, but I was having cramping each time I played once I started getting, warmed up, right? Once I started actually putting a lot of force into them. So a 2E, I think you go up a half size, but you just got to watch out for the heel slippage. So I think a half size is okay as long as you're doing the runner's knot. I think a 4E might be a mismatch on these shoes just because of how the ankle collar is and potentially the heel slippage issues. Now, in terms of the snake bitten foot or any lumps, bumps, and bruises you've got, I think with an orthotic in them for ball of foot pain, they're okay. They're not the best. In terms of heel pain though, if you have an orthotic, once again, I think they're okay as long as it's a low profile orthotic that you're not gonna be heel slipping, because if you heel slip and you have pain in your heel, remember, that's just one more time the shoe's hitting you in the heel, right? So you're not only getting hit when you come down, when you come up, the heel of the shoe is then smacking you again. So low profile orthotic in there, I think is fine for that, and I think is fine for heel pain. Tendinitis or arch strain for a budget model shoe with an orthotic, I think this is a low profile orthotic, I think is actually pretty decent. It has a really aggressive pointed lateral flange, and the Nike swoosh is pretty substantial that comes all the way up here to the runner's knot line to the ankle collar. Actually does give some decent foxing to the shoes. And looking at the performance, the Immortality 3, yeah, I mean, when I first took them out of the box, they felt very springy, very bouncy, very lively on court, really. I actually had a nice time just kind of going around doing shoot-around practice. It was really fun in these. Remember, I am not the lightest weight dude out there, so I'm gonna start to bottom shoes out faster than somebody, that is 20, 30 pounds lighter than me, right? So I think somebody, like I said, on the lighter end of the spectrum is gonna experience what I experienced the first day I had them for a lot longer, for sure. I do think in terms of a speedy shoe for someone that doesn't mind a little bit of rubber warming and doesn't mind cleaning off the treads or plays on, outdoor courts, grittier courts, they're a very shifty shoe, and they're a very easy shoe for a point or a shooting guard to kind of work their way around the perimeter, maybe create space, and then get up into the air for a jump shot. I think these would do really well. In terms of, up and under the hoop and rebounding and up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, with a stiff orthotic, I think they're okay, but definitely, I'm sure Giannis has orthotics in his shoes, and remember, he's getting brand new pairs of these probably to play in, so I'm not surprised he could play well in these, right, for one game. I think if you made him wear the same pair of these over and over and over again, he'd probably be, screaming for a new pair. So I really think the dividing line on these is weight, for sure. I think if you're, I'd say maybe under 180 pounds, I think these are going to last longer for you versus if you're somebody over that 180 pound mark. So that's kind of just that's an arbitrary line, but I'd say kind of around that weight is going to be the dividing line. So I would love to hear your thoughts on the Immortality 3, if you like them better than the Freak 5, because I know I've gotten a lot of interesting comments on the Freak 5. Some people have liked them more than they thought they would, myself included. Other people have just thought they were really not for them, and we're waiting for the Immortality 3 to come out. I will say, coincidentally, the Freak 5 kid shoe is really good. That oversized Nike logo is nice and containing for a little kid playing basketball. I know that because my kid's got a pair of the Freak 5s. That's the one I chose for him after he tried a few of them. So that's a little interesting how like the kid shoe version of the Freak 5 is, I think, better than the regular version of the Freak 5. If it were me playing, I would probably still go with the Freak 5 because I really like the slick, low profile feeling of it. I really like the outsole tread of it. But in terms of a budget shoe on the Nike side of things, I think these are fine. And I do think this is a nice shoe. I really don't think there's much wrong with it in terms of what it's intended to do. So I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, like I said. And if you want to see the older sibling to these, the Nike Zoom Freak 5 going to the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam, especially Renew foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.